April 13, 1945. The early morning air over the Netherlands was cold and still. In the distance, the Allies prepared to carry out a plan that could destroy an entire city. Zwolle, a medieval Dutch city, was marked for annihilation. 40,000, no 50,000 civilians were trapped inside. Houses, streets, churches and markets would be reduced to rubble. The plan was precise, calculated and brutal. But one man, broken, battered and blind in one eye, was about to rewrite history. Lau Major was only 24 years old, yet he carried the scars of a lifetime of battle. His back was broken. His ankles were shattered. His left eye was gone, replaced by darkness. Shrapnel had ripped through his body more times than anyone should survive. Most men in his position would have been sent home, safe and far from the front lines. Most men would have accepted the doctor's orders and ended their combat days quietly. But Lau Major was not most men. His story didn't start in April 1945. It began on June 6, 1944, D-Day, the largest seaborne invasion in history. Lau landed on Juno Beach in the first wave, part of a force facing machine guns, mortars and chaos. Explosions threw sand and steel into the air. Men screamed. Some ran, some fell, some disappeared forever. Lau wasn't a strategist, he was a hunter. He moved with a single machine gunner, hunting a German heavy machine gun bunker. Close enough to see the soldiers, close enough to feel the danger. Then a grenade exploded directly in front of them. The blast was catastrophic. Shrapnel tore through Lau's left side. His world went red. When he woke up, he was lying in a field hospital. A medic shook his head. His left eye was gone. He had severe injuries to his back, his ribs, and his legs. The doctor said the same words repeated in the history of countless soldiers: "Your war is over." They told him he was unfit for combat. He was being sent to England. But Lau Major did not obey orders. He refused the evacuation. He told the medics he only needed one eye to aim. "I am a sniper," he said. "I only need one eye." His mind was clear, his determination unwavering. The rules, the doctrine, the orders, they were meaningless to him. Pain, injury, and disability were not barriers. They were challenges. Lau returned to his regiment, limping, scarred, and relentless. He had become something new, a one-eyed ghost in the ranks, moving silently but striking fear in the hearts of the enemy. In the months that followed, Lau proved himself time and time again. During the Battle of the Scheldt, he faced an entire company of elite SS soldiers alone. Using cunning, timing, and sheer audacity, he created the illusion of a massive ambush. His bursts of machine gun fire, precise grenade throws, and rapid movement made the Germans believe they were surrounded by a full regiment. Within minutes, 93 soldiers surrendered to him, alone. Lau Major had become a legend, feared not for the size of his force but for the mind behind his actions. By April 1945, the Second World War was in its final throes. The Canadian Army was advancing across the Netherlands, smashing through exhausted but still dangerous German forces. Ahead lay Zwolle, a city fortified with bridges, canals, and 1,000 German soldiers. The Allied High Command issued their orders: flatten the city. Kill all who remained. Civilians, soldiers, none would be spared. The plan was cold, impersonal, and terrifyingly efficient. To them, the city was just a problem, a number in a ledger, a necessary casualty. Lau Major listened to the orders. His back ached. His body screamed in protest. His vision was half gone. Every step hurt. Most men would have given up, withdrawn, or accepted the inevitable destruction. But Lau's mind was already working. The city, the civilians, the innocent, they could still be saved. The rules didn't matter. Orders didn't matter. Doctrine didn't matter. He would enter Zwolle alone if he had to. He would face the enemy, defy the odds, and fight not for glory, not for medals, but for life itself. He packed only what he needed: a Sten gun, grenades, and ammunition. Each step toward the city was agony. His broken back felt like it was on fire. His legs threatened to collapse under him. Yet he moved forward, driven by a force that no injury could stop. Lau Major was no longer just a soldier. He was a storm, a hunter, a shadow. And that night, he would become the one man who could change the fate of 50,000 people. As the darkness of Zwolle closed around him, Lau Major felt the weight of every life in the city. Every innocent soul depended on him. One misstep could mean death. One failed move could destroy everything. But he had faced death before. He had survived explosions, bullets, and impossible odds. And now, he would enter the city alone, a one-eyed ghost carrying the impossible on his shoulders. The world did not know him yet. The generals in their bunkers did not understand him. and the Germans had no idea what was coming. Lao Major was about to break every rule, defy every order, and perform a trick so audacious it would save a city, or cost him his life. Ending suspense. A man they called unfit for war is about to enter a city alone, and the world will never believe what happens next. 2 months after D-Day, Lao Major had already earned a reputation among his fellow soldiers. They called him mad, fearless, unbreakable. He was not a hero in the traditional sense. He did not wait for orders or medals. He acted on instinct, on courage, on a strange mixture of rage and calculation. He had survived explosions that should have killed him. He had lost an eye and continued to fight. And now, in the wet, muddy streets of a small village in the Scheldt, he was about to prove that one man could change the course of battle. The Canadian army was pushing toward Antwerp. The Germans had dug in deep. Villages were flooded, roads torn apart, and the enemy lay in wait behind every wall, every canal, every ruined building. Lao Major was on a reconnaissance patrol, moving alone through the streets, scouting for signs of enemy positions. He was small, only 5'7", limping from his back injury, but his mind was sharp, calculating. He saw movement, a patrol of nearly 100 German soldiers, SS troops, the elite of the elite. Most men would have hidden, retreated, radioed their position, or waited for reinforcements. Not Lao Major. He watched them move through the streets, quiet, calm, confident. They had no idea that a single one-eyed soldier was observing them. Lao crouched in the shadows, calculating. He waited until they had gone far enough into the village, deep into narrow, flooded streets. Then he struck. The first burst of his Sten gun was precise. The enemy officer in front of the patrol was dead before anyone could react. Chaos erupted instantly. Soldiers dove for cover, shooting wildly at empty streets, walls, and the sky. They had no idea where the attack had come from. Lao moved silently, using the buildings, the canals, the shadows as cover. He reappeared on their flank, opening fire again, forcing the patrol to scatter. It was like the streets themselves were alive, attacking from every direction. But Lao did not stop there. He had studied the art of confusion, the tricks of irregular warfare. He knew that terror could be as deadly as bullets. He grabbed grenades from a nearby stash of German equipment and started tossing them into the midst of the soldiers. Explosions ripped through their ranks, sending them screaming, panicking, unsure how many men they were facing. Lao was everywhere, yet he was alone. And then came the moment that would turn this action into legend. A young German soldier, no older than 18, ran straight into Lao's path. Lao grabbed him, knife to his throat, and spoke calmly in broken German and French. He did not kill the boy. Instead, he sent him back to his commander with a message: "The Canadians are here. Surrender now or die." The soldier ran. 10 minutes later, a white flag appeared. The German commander, convinced his entire regiment was surrounded by a superior force, walked out cautiously. Lao Major, one man with one eye, was there to meet him. In that single moment, the impossible became reality. 93 soldiers, elite SS troops, had surrendered to him alone. When he marched them back to the Canadian lines, his own commanders were stunned. They thought he was leading a platoon. They could not believe that one small broken soldier had captured an entire company of enemy troops. They recommended him for the Distinguished Conduct Medal. But Lao refused. Medals did not interest him. The incompetence of generals did not impress him. What mattered was action, courage, and results. This was the kind of man who was about to enter Zvola. He had already survived injuries that should have ended his war. He had captured 100 soldiers with his wits and audacity. And yet, he was ready to face a city filled with 1,000 Germans, with artillery about to destroy it, and 50,000 innocent civilians in the line of fire. Lao Major was not a soldier who followed doctrine. He was a force of nature. Where others saw numbers, he saw opportunity. Where others saw danger, he saw a game of shadows and deception. The rules did not apply to him because he did not fight like other men. He fought like a storm, unpredictable, unstoppable, and terrifying. His actions during the Scheldt were more than a battle tactic. They were a lesson in psychology. The Germans were trained, disciplined, elite. Yet Lao Major showed that fear could be weaponized. By creating the illusion of a larger force, by using sound, movement, and sudden violence, he made the enemy believe they faced a full-scale attack. And in that belief they surrendered. By the time the Canadian commanders understood what had happened, Lao was gone, blending back into the lines, silent, limping, wounded, but undefeated. He did not boast. He did not celebrate. He simply moved on because there was more work to do, more battles to face, and more lives to save. And now, in April 1945, Lao Major was standing on the edge of Zvola. The city was heavily fortified, the enemy determined, the civilians in mortal danger. The artillery was ready. The plan was simple: destroy the city, kill everyone inside and move on. To the generals it was just another calculation. To Lao Major it was a challenge. A city to save, a war to bend to his will, and a test of everything he had learned since D-Day. Ending suspense, one man had already defeated 100 soldiers alone. But now he faced 1,000. Zvola was a fortress, the civilians were counting on him, and the world had never seen a soldier like Lao Major. What he would do next would defy belief, and no one would be able to stop him. Midnight, April 13, 1945. The streets of Zvola were cloaked in darkness, silent but for the occasional whisper of wind and the distant creak of a shutter. The city slept, unaware that its fate teetered on a knife's edge. 50,000 civilians were trapped below in their cellars, waiting for the morning artillery barrage that would turn the city into rubble. And yet, among the shadows, two men were about to challenge that fate. Lao Major crouched at the edge of the canal, his Sten gun in one hand, grenades stuffed in his pockets. His back a solid block of pain, his broken ankles screaming with every movement, his one good eye scanning the darkness. Beside him was Corporal Willie Arzino, his closest friend, his only companion on this suicide mission. Both men understood the stakes. One misstep, one loud sound, and they would be dead before the enemy even realized what was happening. The plan was simple in theory: enter the city, scout the German garrison, report their numbers, find civilians if possible, and escape before dawn. In practice it was a death sentence. The garrison numbered over 1,000 men, a mix of elite SS troops and regular Wehrmacht soldiers. Machine guns, mortars and artillery positions dotted the streets and rooftops. Any miscalculation could trap them like rats in a cage. But Lao Major did not think like other soldiers. He did not rely on numbers. He relied on fear, deception, and the sheer audacity of his actions. They found a small boat hidden under a bridge. Lao lifted it carefully, testing the weight, listening for sounds of patrols. "Quiet," he whispered to Willie, and together they paddled silently across the canal. The water was icy, numbing their hands, but the cold sharpened their senses. When they reached the far bank, the city loomed before them, black and silent, streets twisting like a labyrinth. As they slipped through the first streets, the tension was unbearable. Every step, every shadow, every sound could mean death. The civilians were already hiding, aware of the coming bombardment. Lao and Willie moved like ghosts, sticking to walls, ducking behind ruins, crossing open squares only when the risk was minimal. Their eyes darted constantly, searching for movement, for glints of steel, for any hint of the enemy. Then, almost too easily, the first shot rang out. A German sniper, positioned in a window above the street, fired. Lao spun, seeing Willie hit in the chest. The shock froze him for a fraction of a second, then instinct took over. Lao dove behind a wall, pulling Willie with him. He whispered fiercely, "Stay with me. Don't die." Willie did not move. His chest rose and fell slowly, pain etched in every line of his face. Lao's heart pounded. He was alone now, the responsibility heavier than ever. But he was not defeated. He remembered Skelt, remembered the capture of 93 SS soldiers. The lesson was the same: confusion could be a weapon. Fear could be multiplied. One man could become an army in the mind of the enemy. He moved again, dragging Willie's body carefully behind him, staying in the shadows, moving block by block. He found a side street, empty, and used it to flank the German position. He tossed a grenade, followed by a burst from his Sten gun. The sniper's position was silenced. Lao paused, breathing hard, surveying the narrow street. He had already begun the psychological part of his mission, to make the Germans believe they were facing a force much larger than it really was. Hour by hour, block by block, Lao and Willie advanced. The city was a maze, full of hidden threats, ruined buildings and tight canals. Every street corner could be an ambush. Every sound could alert a patrol. But Lao moved with purpose, dragging Willie's bloodied body when needed, firing bursts to simulate larger numbers, tossing grenades to make it seem as if multiple soldiers were attacking from multiple directions. The Germans were confused, panicked, and terrified. Reports began filtering into their command post. Attacks from all sides, explosions, machine gun fire, but no one could see the attackers. By 2 a.m., Lao had turned a few empty streets into a theater of terror. He had created the illusion of a full-scale assault. Enemy soldiers reported hundreds of attackers, though in reality, there were only 2 men. The psychological impact was immediate. The German garrison tightened up, hesitated, communicated frantically, and began doubting their own intelligence. Lao was a ghost, a shadow, a force that could not be pinned down. But the night was not over. Lao's injuries screamed at him. His back felt as if it were splitting apart, his legs were burning and his hands were slick with blood. Yet he pressed on. Every second counted. The artillery would begin at 6 a.m. and he had to stop it. The civilians' lives depended on his speed, his cunning and his refusal to die. And then, deeper in the city, a new threat appeared, a German patrol rounding a corner. Lao quickly assessed the situation. Willie could barely move, his injuries slowing them down. Lao knew he had to act fast. He fired a burst, throwing the patrol into confusion. They returned fire blindly, missing him entirely. Lao flanked them, tossing grenades, simulating a full platoon. Panic erupted. The Germans scattered, screaming that the Canadians were everywhere. Lao had done it again. One man had created the illusion of hundreds. As the first hints of dawn touched the rooftops, Lao paused, catching his breath, surveying the city. The streets were filled with chaos. Explosions, gunfire, and panic had turned Zvola into a place of fear. He had not yet faced the full garrison, but already the enemy was on edge, uncertain, terrified. 50,000 lives hung in the balance, and one man's courage, his madness, his determination, was the only thing standing between life and death. Ending suspense. Lao Major had survived explosions, bullets, and impossible odds. He had entered a city alone with his friend, facing 1,000 soldiers. But the worst was yet to come. Zvola's heart was still alive with the enemy. And Lao was about to unleash a plan so audacious, so insane, that the world would never believe it, and 50,000 civilians' lives would depend entirely on him. By 3 a.m. the streets of Zvola were no longer empty. They were alive with fear, though the Germans did not yet know the source. One man, limping and broken, was about to turn the city into a stage of terror. Lao Major, a single soldier with one eye and 2 Sten guns, had become something the Germans could not understand. A ghost. Willie Arzino, wounded and barely able to move, remained hidden in the shadows. Lao looked back once, his face streaked with soot and sweat, then turned toward the enemy positions. The SS troops had no idea what was coming. Reports of hundreds of attackers were already spreading. Patrols hesitated. Officers shouted orders, but no one could confirm what they were fighting. Lao had learned a lesson in Skelt. Confusion could be more deadly than bullets. And tonight he would apply it to its fullest. He moved silently, shadow to shadow, alley to alley. Each step was calculated, each burst of gunfire deliberate. The streets were narrow, lined with ruined buildings, canals, and debris. Lao used every obstacle to his advantage. From the shadows, he fired a few rounds, then vanished, reappearing blocks away, throwing grenades into windows and empty streets. The explosions, the flashes, the sound of bullets ricocheting, it all created the illusion of a massive assault. The Germans panicked. A patrol reported fire from the north. Another heard gunfire from the west. "They are everywhere," a terrified soldier shouted. Lao smiled grimly. One man had become a phantom army. He moved through the city like a storm, striking, disappearing, striking again. He was not fighting soldiers. He was fighting fear itself. At 3:30 a.m., Lao encountered a small group of SS soldiers trying to regroup near a barricade. They believed they were cornering the attackers, but Lao was already behind them. He opened fire with one Sten gun while tossing a grenade from his other hand. Screams echoed through the streets. Soldiers scattered, thinking they were surrounded by a battalion. Lao advanced quickly, simulating reinforcements by shouting orders in German from the shadows. The terror was real, the effect immediate. By 4 a.m. the city had transformed. The German garrison, 1,000 strong, believed they were under full-scale assault. Soldiers fired wildly into empty streets. Officers argued with one another, confused and terrified. Every explosion, every gunshot, every shadow was Lao Major. He was a ghost, a one-man army, the nightmare that haunted their every movement. He remembered Skelt, remembered the 93 SS soldiers who had surrendered to him alone. The principle was the same, the mind could be tricked. You did not need numbers, you needed belief. And the Germans believed. They believed a full regiment was hunting them, that the city was under siege, that death could strike from any corner. But Lao was not done. He needed to control the heart of the city, the SS headquarters, a fortified building defended by the fanatical elite. He moved quietly through the shadows, finding gasoline cans stacked against the building for German vehicles. He knew what he had to do. Grenades and bullets were not enough. Fire would create chaos, panic, and destruction without him risking direct confrontation with hundreds of soldiers at once. He dragged the cans to the entrance of the building, pouring gasoline over the doors and sandbags. His back screamed in protest, his legs ached, but he forced himself to stand. He loaded his last magazine, took a deep breath, and fired at the gasoline. Flames erupted, consuming the barricades, the entrance, the SS stronghold. The city was alight with fire, the smoke twisting into the night sky. Soldiers fled in terror, many abandoning their weapons, some tripping over one another in the chaos. Lau picked them off with precision, moving like a shadow from one street to the next. By 4:30 a.m., the city was in complete disorder. Explosions had torn through multiple blocks. Machine gun fire echoed from every direction. The Germans were convinced the Canadian army had already entered in force. Officers shouted orders, tried to organize defenses, but fear paralyzed them. Lau Major, alone, was controlling the battlefield with nothing but skill, terror, and audacity. At this moment he found himself face to face with a German command car. The officer inside raised his pistol, thinking he could take down a single soldier. Lau raised his Sten guns, firing in quick succession. The car skidded, crashing into a wall. The officer scrambled out, hands in the air, terrified. Lau did not kill him. Instead, he forced the officer into the car and made him drive to the SS headquarters, a messenger of terror. The officer would now spread the story that the Canadians were everywhere, that an entire army hunted them, when in reality, it was just one man. The psychological effect was complete. The garrison broke. Soldiers ran toward the bridges, toward the roads, trying to escape the army that was actually Lau Major alone. And Lau, limping through the streets, firing when necessary, throwing grenades, controlling every movement, became the shepherd of this terrified flock. The city was his. Ending suspense. Lau had turned Zvola into his battlefield, not with numbers or artillery, but with fear, fire, and illusion. Yet the dawn was approaching. The artillery meant to destroy the city at 6 a.m. was still scheduled to fire. Lau had 4 hours of chaos behind him, but now he had to face the greatest challenge yet: stop the bombardment and save 50,000 civilians, alone. The first light of dawn had begun to creep over the rooftops of Zvola, painting the city in cold gray. Smoke still twisted from burning buildings, gunfire echoed from distant streets, and the city had become a place of chaos. Yet the greatest danger remained unseen: the Allied artillery poised to flatten the city at 6 a.m., unaware that 50,000 innocent lives hung in the balance. Lau Major, limping, broken, and bloodied, had 4 hours to stop it. 4 hours to save an entire city. His one good eye scanned the streets, calculating, planning, moving faster than his damaged body should have allowed. Every step sent sharp pains through his back, his legs screaming with every movement. His hands were cut and blistered, his uniform soaked with blood and sweat. He had already fought hundreds of Germans in the shadows, turned a garrison into a panicked army, and burned their headquarters to the ground. But now the city itself was a ticking clock, and he had to move faster than time itself. Willie Arzino lay hidden in a cellar, too wounded to continue. Lau had left him behind temporarily, but he could not afford to linger. Every second counted. He moved through the alleys, across open squares, and over fallen debris. The artillery positions were still 10 blocks away, a forest of steel and destruction. To reach them he would have to cross streets likely crawling with German stragglers, booby traps, and snipers. And yet, Lau moved like a shadow, limping, crawling when necessary, always forward. The streets were eerily quiet now, but Lau knew better than to trust silence. Every ruined building could conceal a sniper. Every overturned cart could hide a mine. He paused briefly behind a wall, listening. Nothing. The city was waiting, holding its breath. He exhaled slowly, then pushed forward. At 5 a.m., he encountered a small patrol attempting to regroup after the chaos of the night. They did not see him until it was too late. Lau opened fire from behind a ruined wall, the Sten gun spitting lead in controlled bursts. Soldiers fell in confusion, some diving into canals, others running blindly into other streets. Lau used their panic as cover, moving past them toward the artillery. One man alone, he was not just fighting soldiers, he was manipulating fear itself, bending it to his will. The next block brought a greater challenge: a group of German engineers guarding the artillery site. They had already begun to prepare the guns for the 6 a.m. bombardment. Lau crouched behind a crumbling wall, calculating the risk. A direct assault would be suicide. But he did not hesitate. He threw a grenade into the center of the group, then followed it with a burst of gunfire. Explosions echoed, Shouts pierced the morning and chaos erupted. Engineers scrambled, some fleeing, some desperately trying to regroup. Lau moved like a phantom, striking again and again. Within minutes, the artillery crew was scattered, immobilized and terrified. But the clock was relentless. 5:15 a.m. The first shells were scheduled to fire in 45 minutes. Lau's body screamed in protest. His back felt like it was breaking, his legs were on fire, and his hands were raw. Every instinct told him to stop, to rest, to give up. But Lau Major had never been a man who listened to instincts meant to preserve life. His mission was greater than him. He pressed on. He reached the command post of the artillery battery. The officers inside were busy preparing the coordinates, unaware of the destruction Lau had already caused. Lau burst through the door, dragging himself forward, bloodied, exhausted but blazing with rage. "Stop it," he shouted. His voice cracked, raw with desperation. "Stop firing. Zvola is clear. Civilians are alive." The officers froze, staring at him. A man, one-eyed, broken and covered in grime and blood, had stormed their command post. The words seemed impossible. "What? Who?" one officer stammered. Lau slammed his hands on the table, producing the dog tags of Willie Arzino as proof. "I've been there. The city is empty of Germans. Civilians are alive. You will destroy them if you fire." Minutes stretched like hours. Lau's words were met with disbelief. Doctrine, orders, the plan, it all seemed stronger than one man's warning. Yet he held nothing back. He screamed, he demanded, he cursed, and finally one officer, seeing the truth in Lau's eye, radioed higher command. "Hold fire. Hold fire. Repeat, do not fire." At 5:30 a.m. the guns remained silent. Lau Major, one man, had stopped the destruction of an entire city. The streets of Zvola were littered with the remnants of chaos, smoke rising from fires he had set, but the civilians were alive, hiding safely in their cellars, waiting for the dawn. Lau limped out of the command post, the adrenaline beginning to fade, replaced by the weight of his injuries and exhaustion. By 5:45 a.m., the first civilians began to emerge, cautiously stepping out of their homes, peering at the broken, smoky streets. Slowly realization spread, they were alive. No bombardment had come. They ran through the streets, crying, laughing, hugging one another, and some even kneeling in thanks. And then they saw him. Lau Major, the one-eyed soldier, limping through the streets, bloodied and battered, but victorious. He had done the impossible. The city was liberated. 50,000 lives had been spared. Not by a regiment, not by doctrine, not by artillery, but by one man's courage, his madness, his sheer refusal to obey limits imposed by the world. Lau Major had become a legend, a ghost who had outwitted an entire garrison, outmaneuvered artillery, and outlasted the limits of the human body. And as dawn broke over Zvola, painting the city in gold and firelight, Lau looked around. There was no celebration for him, no medals yet, no cheers. Only the city, alive, breathing, free. He had won, but the cost had been immense. His friend Willie was gone, his body broken, his own body shattered. Yet Lau Major had proven what one determined, fearless and relentless human being could achieve. Ending suspense. The night of terror was over, the city saved, but Lau Major's story was far from finished. This one man had defied death, defied orders, and altered the fate of 50,000 people. And yet he would not rest. The war still raged, and Lau Major would continue to write his legend in blood, fire, and courage, one impossible act at a time. The sun was fully rising over Zvola now, casting long shadows across the rubble-strewn streets. Smoke still twisted from the fires that had consumed SS positions the night before. Civilians poured into the streets, their faces a mix of relief, disbelief, and joy. But amid the chaos and celebration, one man stood apart, limping slowly, bloodied, broken, yet calm. Lau Major, the one-eyed private, the ghost of Zvola, had done what no regiment, no artillery battery, and no plan could do. He had saved 50,000 lives. When the commanding officers finally caught up with him, their expressions were a mixture of shock, awe, and confusion. They had heard reports of fires, explosions, and gunfire all across the city. They had radioed higher command. Enemy forces overwhelmed, retreating, entire garrison gone, the messages had said. No one could believe the truth, it had all been the work of a single man. The CO looked at Lau, saw the blood on his hands, the grime on his uniform, the unsteady limp, and the burning determination in his one eye. He shook his head. "Private, what you've done, it's impossible. The city is safe, the Germans gone, all because of you." Lau did not smile. He did not boast. He simply handed over the dog tags of Willie Arzino, his friend, his companion now gone. He's still inside, Lau said softly. I couldn't leave him. I had to make sure the others could live. The CO understood. The man before him was not just brave, he was relentless. He had fought through death itself and returned victorious. Reports were immediately filed, recommendations were sent up the chain of command. A medal, the Distinguished Conduct Medal, was proposed. It was the second highest award for bravery in the Commonwealth, a recognition that most men would have risked their lives to earn. But Lau Major refused. He shook his head, limping toward the canal. I don't want it, he said. The generals made the plan. I followed no orders. I don't want a medal for breaking rules. His voice was calm, resolute. His mind was already moving ahead, thinking of the next challenge, the next mission, the next impossible task. Medals, fame, and recognition meant nothing to a man who had stared into death every day for months and returned alive. The city of Zvola, however, would not forget. Streets were later named after him. Every year, the citizens celebrated his courage, the one-eyed soldier who had walked into their city alone and saved them from annihilation. But Lau Major was not a man who lingered on glory. He returned to his regiment, already thinking of the next battle, the next enemy, the next impossible situation he could conquer. He had survived D-Day, survived explosions, survived broken bones and shattered ankles, survived a city's night of terror. Zvola was his masterpiece, but it was not the end of his story. He had a reputation now, yes, a ghost, a madman, a force that defied doctrine, but Lau Major was far from finished. The war in Europe was ending, but the world still had battles to fight. The lessons Lau had learned in Zvola, the art of fear, the power of imagination, the strength of will, would serve him again. He was a man who did not wait for orders. He was a man who created his own path, forged from courage, madness, and the relentless desire to protect others. Years later, in 1950, the Korean War would call him again. Lau, now a sergeant, still limping, still broken, still one-eyed, would face impossible odds once more. The doctrine would tell him to retreat. 2 Chinese divisions, tens of thousands of soldiers, against a handful of men. Every expert would say it was suicide. But Lau Major had learned something the world often forgot. Fear could be weaponized. Numbers were meaningless if the mind believed otherwise. Just as in Zvola, Lau Major would take his small group, sound like an entire army, move like shadows, strike like a ghost, and stop the enemy in their tracks. The Simo Hai-Ha trick, the McKenna principle of impossible innovation, he had made them his own. And the world would again witness the courage of one man against overwhelming odds. For now, though, Zvola stood liberated. 50,000 civilians had been spared, a city saved from destruction, and history recorded a story so unbelievable that many would dismiss it as legend. But Lau Major knew the truth. It was not luck, not divine intervention. It was courage, cunning, and an unbreakable refusal to accept limits imposed by others. The city slowly came alive as the civilians celebrated. Children ran through the streets, mothers wept, men embraced. But in the middle of the joy, Lau moved quietly, limping back to his regiment, carrying the weight of victory and the pain of loss. Willie Arzino's death weighed heavily on him, but he had honored his friend's sacrifice. He had made the illegal modification, the impossible act that defied doctrine, and in doing so had rewritten history. Ending suspense. Lau Major had saved Zvola, but this was only the beginning. The world had not yet seen the full extent of his legend. Broken, one-eyed, relentless, he would fight again, shaping history one impossible act at a time. The ghost of Zvola was far from finished. The war in Europe was over. Zvola had been saved, the German garrison crushed, and 50,000 civilians were alive, thanks to one man, Lau Major. But for him there was no rest, no celebration, no quiet retirement. The battlefield had marked him. His body was broken, his back stiff, his legs forever scarred. His left eye was gone, and his hands bore the wounds of battles most men could not survive. Yet his mind, sharp and relentless, was ready for the next impossible challenge. The medal he had once refused in Zvola now seemed meaningless. Lau Major did not fight for medals or praise. He fought because it was necessary. He fought because others could not or would not. The world recognized heroes, but Lau did not wait for recognition. He created his own legend, forged in fire, blood, and pain. By 1950 the Korean War erupted. China entered the conflict, and the UN forces faced overwhelming numbers. Lau Major, now a sergeant, volunteered. He returned to the battlefield, limping but unbroken, carrying the same courage that had saved Zvola. His unit was small, outnumbered, exhausted. Doctrine and experts said retreat. 2 Chinese divisions were advancing. Odds were impossible. But Lao had learned the Simo Haiha principle, the McKenna philosophy of the illegal modification, turning fear, perception and creativity into weapons. He took his 19 men to Hill 355, a vital position. They dug in, prepared their weapons and waited. And then Lao acted. He ran back and forth across the hill, firing his machine gun, throwing grenades, shouting orders. The enemy heard the guns, saw movement, believed a full regiment held the hill. For 3 days, Lao Major made them believe the impossible, that a massive force was entrenched. The Chinese hesitated, faltered, and eventually stopped their advance. 19 men had held off tens of thousands. Once again, one man had changed the course of history. When the battle ended, Lao Major survived, battered but alive. He was awarded a second Distinguished Conduct Medal, the only Canadian in history to receive the honor twice in 2 different wars. Yet even this recognition was secondary to him. Lao never sought glory. He was not a hero for medals, he was a hero because he refused to let the impossible remain impossible. After Korea, Lao returned home to Montreal. He lived quietly, a man of simple habits, but the legend of his deeds followed him. Every year he returned to Zvola. The city remembered him, named streets after him, held parades, and celebrated the one-eyed soldier who had walked into their city alone and saved them from certain death. Children would gather to hear his story, and the citizens, grown and old, would recount the night when a single private became an army, a ghost, and a savior. Lao Major lived a long life. He never boasted, never sought fame, and rarely spoke of the horrors he had survived. Yet the stories of Zvola, the Scheldt, and Hill 355 endured. Veterans, historians, and ordinary people marveled at his courage, his madness, and his relentless will. To them he was more than a soldier. He was a legend, a man who had proven that one determined person could defy doctrine, defeat impossible odds, and change the fate of thousands. Even in old age, Lao remained unbowed. He limped slightly, his back never fully healed, but his spirit was as sharp as ever. Visitors to Zvola would see the street named after him, and children would ask about the one-eyed soldier. He would smile faintly, nod, and say simply, "I did what anyone should have done. I fought. That's all." When he passed away in 2008 at the age of 87, the world mourned quietly. Soldiers, historians, and citizens of Zvola paid tribute to a man who had changed the course of history not once but twice. His legacy was not just in medals or statues, but in lives saved, battles won, and the enduring truth that courage, creativity, and determination can triumph over any obstacle. Lao Major's story is now legend. A broken, one-eyed private became a ghost that haunted the enemy, a force that defied doctrine, a hero who saved 50,000 civilians with nothing but his courage, his mind, and his relentless will. His life proves that wars are not won by rules alone, by numbers alone, or by strategy alone. They are won by individuals who refuse to accept limits, who challenge the impossible, and who act when others hesitate. Even today, in Zvola, in Montreal, and in the memories of those who study history, Lao Major lives on. His ghost is in the streets, in the alleys, in the minds of those who dare to face impossible odds. One broken soldier, one man with one eye, one life of relentless courage. A legend that will never be forgotten. Ending suspense. The wars are over, but the lessons of Lao Major remain. Every time someone faces impossible odds, every time courage meets fear, the ghost of Zvola whispers, "Do not follow the rules blindly. Do what is right. Defy the impossible. And history will remember you."